Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Zack Snyder's Justice League. And look, I don't think I really need to get into the plot of this movie at all, because you guys know from the theatrical cut what this film is really all about. I think what's more interesting is getting into how this really came to be, because this is one of those things where I truly did not think it was going to see the light of day. I remember talking to people about the Snyder Cut and being like, sure, it would be nice to see him do it, but I don't know if it's actually going to happen because I generally did not know if he had the capability to make something like this. I did not think that there was a scenario in which you could just redo this entire movie and you could make the film that Snyder wanted to make. Well, turns out that's not the case. We now have Zack Snyder's Justice League. There were multiple petitions saying release the Snyder Cut and things like that. There were all of these people who were just rallying for Snyder, and I realized, oh, this is actually going to be a thing. It turned out to be, a first an HBO Max miniseries, but then it turned into a 4-hour movie, and going into this film, I was very interested to see how it was going to turn out, but even more so when I rewatched the original cut, which is an absolute disaster on pretty much all fronts. I mean, I rewatched it, and I truly don't know how I had anything good to say about it initially. I think it is a complete disaster of a film that is almost broken entirely. There's really nothing about it that I think actually works. It was completely bastardized by Joss Whedon, but also by Warner Brothers themselves because of that mandate that they had and other various reasons why that film was just such utter garbage. But going into this, I still was a little bit skeptical because I'm not a huge fan of the other Zack Snyder DC films. I'm not a huge fan of Man of Steel. I like a lot of elements of it, but I think overall it's a film that is just trying to do way too much, and it just does. It's hard, especially to buy into certain things that happen in like the third act of the movie that really just kind of bring it down for me. So I've never been a huge fan of that one. And then Batman v Superman, I've had a really weird history with. Initially, I liked it, but then upon thinking about it, I really didn't at all. In fact, I kind of hated it. But I've recently rewatched it, and I don't hate it anymore. I think there are a lot of interesting ideas in there. I just think it's a movie that is way too overstuffed, and it felt like it was trying to accomplish way too much and would have been better if it was spread across other films. But I've always admired who Snyder is. This is someone that clearly wants to tell very different type of comic book stories. He utilizes the idea of them being gods and goddesses and things like that. And so I was very interested in what he was going to do with this cut, hoping that it could actually turn out to be somewhat good. And so I've now seen the Snyder Cut, and what does it really do to fix the film? Well, actually, a lot. Not only is this a way better film than the theatrical one, it's actually really fucking great. This is maybe one of the best comic book films that I've seen in a while. It is easily the best entry in the DCU so far, and really just an example of what the Snyderverse really could have been if we were actually given time to establish it. If Snyder was able to make the movie that he wanted to, when that horrible tragedy of his daughter killing herself didn't happen, it really could have been something special, and this film really does hint at what we could have gotten. This is an incredibly ambitious and really risky film that is able to do a lot more than I thought it would, and it's really unfortunate, the film that we really did end up getting, but thank God this version is here, because now it will be, I think, the Justice League that people remember. It will be the definitive cut of the Justice League that people end up watching, which is amazing to see, but we're just getting to right now. Now, in terms of the acting, when it comes to this movie. I mean, everyone really does do a great job here, whether it's Ben Affleck or Henry Cavill or Gal Gadot. I mean, everyone really does give a very strong performance, but there is one person I want to specifically highlight among this ensemble, because it's someone that I truly did not know had the range that he did, and that's Ray Fisher. Ray Fisher, of course, plays Cyborg, and, you know, in the original theatrical cut, he really did not give much of an impression. I really did not get much of an impression from him, because of the fact that almost all of his scenes were just chopped up, and we really didn't get to see anything from Cyborg. He felt more like a plot device than anything, but I do remember saying that I thought Ray Fisher was generally very likable and fun in that movie, and definitely seemed like someone that had a lot of potential. You watch him here, and I'm just shocked that they cut out as much as they did, because he really gives the standout performance in this entire film. I mean, Ray Fisher is phenomenal here. He gives a really emotionally complex performance and really peeling back the layers of this character who has these ties to the mother box that are so personal, to the point where it's almost tempting him to act a certain way. And Fisher does such a great job with diving headfirst into that. You really find yourself caring for this character as a result, and I just really loved what he ended up doing in this film. It's a real shame that all the shit that has come out about Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon has, because I really do think that Fisher is a great asset to this universe. I think he's someone that would have been a consistent standout. He would have been someone that was just a real gem of what we ended up getting for the DCU. And I don't know what they have to do to work it out. I don't know if it's fixable. A lot of it kind of seems unsalvageable, unfortunately. But if there is any justice in the world, if there is any way to figure it out, make it happen, because I really wish we could see more of just Ray Fisher's performance. Anything you do with Cyborg moving forward, I would be there for. Anything they announced with Cyborg moving forward, I would be there for. I just don't know if we're really going to get it. And if this is really the only performance we get to see of Ray Fisher, it's a damn good one, and he really does kill it in this role. And I think really is the big standout of this entire movie. It's a real shame that there was so much that was left on the cutting room floor with him, because he really is phenomenal here. The other person I really do want to highlight, though, in this film is Ezra Miller, who, if you watch back my review of the 2017 film, I said I, loved him in that movie. I don't know what I was thinking, because I watched back the theatrical cut, and he's terrible in there. He's so stiff and awkward, and it's just so obvious they want to make him the comedic relief. And here, yes, he is the comedic relief, but it's far more natural this time around. You understand why Barry Allen works in the way that he does, and I think that Miller does a much better job because of that, because he feels like he's a lot more into the role. It doesn't feel as forced. It doesn't feel as weird as it did in that one, and I think he overall did do a really good job here. So I was definitely very impressed by Ezra Miller, considerably more than I was in the theatrical cut for sure. I thought he definitely did do a really great job. Really, this entire cast, I mean, they all have such great chemistry. They all work very well together. Even Ciaran Hinds, I felt like, had so much more to do in this film as Steppenwolf. He really gets to showcase his talents, and just in general, he gives a very memorable villain performance. I think by the end of this film, I think I can safely say Steppenwolf is probably the best villain that we've had in the DCU so far, and Ciaran Hinds, I think, gives a really strong performance there as a result. And just, I really love this entire cast. I think everyone does a great job acting-wise, but moving away from that, we have to get into the directing here by Snyder, because obviously the theatrical cut, he really did not direct that film. That film was very much directed by Joss Whedon, and you can very much tell, because this film has a much different tone to it. Justice League was trying so hard to be a very light-hearted and fun adventure, and it just didn't fit with what Snyder really wanted to do. And does this film have a lot of fun moments? Yes, but in general, this is a very emotional movie. There's a lot of emotion behind it, and there's so much passion behind it, and it is just amazing to see. A lot of people are probably going to be turned off by the fact that Snyder has said that he wanted to basically cram as much into this movie as possible, but it really does make the film that much more dynamic as a result. I mean, the things that Snyder is willing to dive into, the things he's willing to do, I think are amazing. Yes, there's a lot of spectacle here, but that's not his entire focus. He wants to tell this story to its fullest potential, and he really does do an excellent job with that, and you can tell just how much this is his vision, how much this is the movie that he really did want to make. Everything feels so much more earned in that way, and it really is because of his directing here. When we have those highs in the movie, they feel like a big deal, but when you have those lows, they also feel very detrimental to these characters, and it really is because of Snyder. There isn't a single false beat in this entire movie, and I think it's just mainly because of how well he ended up directing it. I was so impressed by what he ended up doing here. Just amazing directing all around. And again, it's a real shame that he ever was forced to step down from that movie. It's very unfortunate what ended up happening, but this really does show what Snyder is capable of when he's working to his fullest potential, when there is no studio that is getting in the way of what he wants to accomplish, when there's no higher-ups telling him, maybe you should cut this out. When he keeps it in, you can see how much better the film is as a result. It flows so much better because of what Snyder is able to do, and I really loved his directing in this film. And here's the thing, I always appreciated Zack Snyder's ambition. I always appreciated the ideas that he was going for. I just never felt his ideas were done in a way that felt earned. It felt like something that he really wanted to do. He's like, oh, this could be really cool, so let me just throw that in there. But it never felt natural for the story. It never felt like it organically fit in there. Here, it very much does. Every single idea that he throws in this movie feels like it's earned, feels like it matters. There's really nothing in this film that feels like that doesn't work, that feels a little too quick. It feels like he's able to put the pieces together in a way where you really do feel like this is earned. You really do feel like this is where we should be in the story. This is the direction this character should be headed in, and he does such an excellent job with that, and I was just really impressed by the way he was able to do that, because like I said, that was a big problem for me within his other films, but he really improved upon it here. Again, I think it's solely because he's able to tell a much fuller story, and it kind of makes me wonder, like, what could have happened to Man of Steel? How much better could that have been if it was a lot longer? What could have happened to Batman v Superman if it was around this length? I do think that if he made his films around this length normally, they would just be far more satisfying overall, because of how well this one really did turn out. We got to talk about the writing here, because that's the other thing that just makes this film so much better. Look, there are a lot of scenes in this film that are similar to the original cut. In fact, there are some scenes that I don't think were changed at all. But the difference is here, every single issue I had with that original movie is pretty much improved upon, because the original film is so focused on just getting right to the good stuff. It wants to get to the team up immediately. It wants you to get to the superhero fights and things like that. It doesn't seem to care very much about what's actually important, which is getting to know these characters. And this film is the complete opposite. It really takes its time in getting you to know everyone, and the writing is so much better as a result. The biggest difference I've already mentioned has to be Cyborg. I mean, I don't know why they would ever think of chopping his stuff down, because he truly does have the best stuff in the entire movie. Cyborg is very much the heart of the team. What was just a plot device in the original cut, here he is the real heart of the movie. He is the thing that makes you care so much about what they're doing, and it is honestly disgraceful that anyone would look at this footage and say, yeah, that's the thing we can cut out. I really don't understand it, because it makes his character so much more compelling as a result. Not only do we get to dive headfirst into his backstory, but we understand his connection to the Mother Box, why it matters so much to him, why he is so hesitant in fighting Steppenwolf, and how Steppenwolf is constantly in his head, and it's phenomenal stuff we end up getting with this character. The relation between him him and his father Silas is far more established, and it just makes for a much better film as a result. Now that we know more of who Cyborg is, we know the effect that this has on him, it just makes his character that much more compelling, and I think the film does a much better job of getting us to understand this character, where he's coming from, why he cares so much about what he's doing. It's just really well written in that way, and I think they do a really good job with that. But moving away from Cyborg, because so many people have talked about how good his stuff is, really all of the characters here, I feel they're written a lot better. Let's take Batman, for example. In the original cut, there's this weird thing where he is so focused on finding these, on finding all of these parademons. He encounters them, and he wants to study more about the meta box and how all of that ends up working, how the mother boxes are done. But it doesn't make sense for Batman to really do that, because Batman wouldn't care as much about the mother boxes. What he cares about is what ended up happening in BVS with Superman dying. That is far more pronounced in this film. You really do feel the shadow that was left by Superman looming throughout this entire movie. It's affecting all of these characters in a very personal way, and even if you weren't into the Superman character in the previous films, I think you'll find yourself caring a bit more in this film, because it really does show the impact that it's had on them. You know, what this really means to them. For someone like Batman, why he decides to make the choice that he does, it just makes far more sense. Why he's put this team together. You really do get to see that. There's a really great scene between him and Wonder Woman where they're really talking things out about, is this actually going to work? There's a great scene with him and Alfred, who is kind of having doubts over what Batman's doing. And I think it's really well done the way the film ends up diving into that. And I think that's a perfect example of taking a character that felt very off in one version, and here he feels the most human he really ever has. And I think it's because we're able to really see that pain. We're able to see the effect that this has really had on him, and it just makes the character that much more interesting overall, and I think they do some really great stuff with that here. Or take the Flash, for example, as well. I think the Flash in general, he's not just a one-trick pony in this movie who is constantly made fun of. He's constantly put down, and people treat him like he doesn't have this amazing super speed. No, he wants to be a superhero, and you get to see him embrace that in all of his glory, and it's just so much better as a result. Or Aquaman, you understand the choices that all these characters make, you understand more because they're able to dive into it more. Why is Aquaman hesitant to join the League? That's something else the film really dives into. It's not just he turns it down because he can talk to fish. There's a little bit more going on. There's a lot more going on, actually, and I really did appreciate that. There's a moment with Aquaman and Cyborg, for example, and it's completely different from what we saw in the theatrical film. Their relationship is so different here, but it's so much better. It gives Aquaman these layers as a character that I truly did not know I needed from him, but it just made it so much more fulfilling in that way. It made his character so much more likable, and it made us understand a part of the film that he was going through before, and it was just stuff like that I really loved a lot. I really loved what they were able to do with a lot of these characters that they weren't able to in the original film. They're not just like goofing around the whole movie. They actually do generally care about each other, and it's really good to see. I really like getting to see that in this film. The film never once feels like it is shying away from really getting into how these characters are feeling in this given moment. And because of the fact that we're able to understand their choices, this whole conflict as a whole just feels so much grander. And it's insane to me because in the theatrical cut, this felt like the most simplified adventure possible. It didn't really seem like that big of a deal. But here, we really do get to see how it affects all of these characters. So in general, it just makes for a far more engaging story. And you understand that Steppenwolf as a whole, a lot of these characters don't really understand. Like Bruce Wayne, for example. He's not really prepared to face Steppenwolf. He's just prepared for the warning that Superman gave him. And that is so much more interesting to me than him wanting to study every single mother box and understand how they work, because that just doesn't feel like Batman to me. That's just not something that Batman would be, this version at least of Batman, would be as interested in. So I think what we end up getting is just far more interesting with Batman, and the whole idea of, is he really ready to do this? You know, is this a good enough team, or is he in over his head with what he's doing? I think that also is a really interesting arc, and I think there's a lot of good stuff that they do there. So again, the team itself is really great. You're given a lot of time to get to know all of them individually, so when they eventually do team up, it just feels far more fulfilling. It doesn't feel like you're getting this too quickly, and that was, I think, my problem with the original cut, is that everything felt like it was happening at warp speed. We would jump from Themyscira, then suddenly we're in Gotham, then suddenly we are, you know, then suddenly we are in, you know, this random city in Russia, then we're with this random family and things like that. And it just constantly was just moving, and it never slowed down. This film really does slow down and give us the time to get to know everyone, so once they actually do team up, we feel that much more into it, and we understand why they've made the choices that they do, and it just makes for a far more fulfilling experience overall. So yeah, I think that part of the film is really well done. I really enjoyed the first 2 hours, especially just getting to see who all of these characters are, because even though we haven't seen Flash or Cyborg have an individual film, this actually makes up for it. You know, you will end this movie and you'll be like, I am content with the fact that we did not get a film from them yet. I know a Flash movie's on the way, but in terms of a Flash movie before this, I remember that was an original complaint for many. I don't think that's a complaint with this film, because I think they do enough good, and you know, they do enough good work with all of these characters, so you don't need any other films to follow it up with. And I think that's something that Snyder did a really good job with here. And Chris Terrio as a writer, I thought just did a really strong job with nearly everything in this movie. There's just deeper context to it. Steppenwolf, even as a villain, is far better here. I'm not trying to act like he is Thanos or anything like that, but he's actually really well written. You understand who his character really is. You get a more deeper idea of what his mission is, why this matters to him, his connection to the character of Darkseid, which really is their version of Thanos, I would say. That's kind of where they're headed with all this, is that he was going to be their Thanos in a way. And it just makes Steppenwolf, I think, the best villain the DCU's had yet. I think he, in general, he feels a lot more human now in terms of his goal. You understand why he wants to do things, and he doesn't just feel like a plot device. He feels like an actual threat. There's a sequence in Themyscira, especially, that I was really on the edge of my seat for, and I couldn't believe it, because it's a very similar to the theatrical cut. It's just elongated here. You get to see a lot more of the damage that he's actually doing, and it's really well done. I really enjoyed what they ended up giving to Steppenwolf as a character. He's far more complex in this movie, and he just makes for a far better villain overall. Even Lois Lane, a character that I really have not liked all that much. In fact, I found her pretty boring. Here, I actually liked her a lot. They do a good job in diving more into how this death of Superman is really taking a toll on her, and kind of diving into her psyche a little bit, and, you know, who she really is outside of just being Superman's girlfriend. And it was a really good arc for her. So again, really every single character I feel like has at least one moment to shine. Every single character has at least one moment where you give a shit about them. Even if you didn't before, I think you will end up caring about them here. They all have a connection to this mother box. They all have a reason for being on this mission, and it's just such a better screenplay because of it. It's amazing what you can do when you actually have the context to things. You know, there's no random scenes of just a Russian family. That's completely scrapped here because it was never necessary for the film to have anyway. This film has actual context to it. This film has an actual underlying story to it, and I think it really does work as a result. So, and the thing that really sucks is that this is really a film that's all about living up to your full potential and, like, fully exploring who you're supposed to be and kind of wrestling with the person that you have been influenced to be, the person that people are telling you to be. Is that really who you want to be? Or is there a better version of you that you haven't explored yet? Really, all of these characters, including Steppenwolf himself, are going through that. And instead, we have the theatrical cut, which distilled this to the most cookie-cutter story possible. It's great to finally see this story play out to its fullest potential. I mean, Snyder really does throw it all out on the line here, but he does it in a way that never feels overstuffed. A lot of people are going to be worried with that 4-hour plus runtime, but it honestly never feels like there's too much going on. It feels very well handled in that way. It feels very manageable as a story. It feels like this is the best version of the story we could have potentially gotten, and I really loved the way everything played out here story-wise. Yeah, the screenplay here in general is just really well done here. I love how much the film really does take its time. Yes, there is a lot of exposition, and that's something that might annoy some people, is that they do a lot of explaining with how the mother boxes work, but I really appreciated it. I thought it made the scene overall a lot more grander, and it made you care more about what they were doing. When Wonder Woman's explaining how the mother boxes work, it just gets you to understand it more. It gets you to care more about everything, and I think it was just really well done. So just really great screenplay all around. I really love the way this film is written. Even Superman himself, when he eventually comes in this film, it feels a lot more earned in this movie, because in the original cut, it's obvious that they're going to end up bringing him back, and here, it's not that it's obvious, it's that it feels like the film has finally earned it. It feels like we are at a place where you need to bring Superman back. So I think it really does work in that way, and I think just in general, the writing here is just so much better. There's so much I love in this film screenplay-wise, and I think it just works so much better overall. The film also doesn't take itself too seriously at points. You know, the Flash is in there, and he's got a lot of good comedic relief, and it really does work in this movie, because the other characters are not like that. They recognize that the Flash is a comedic character, and that he's going to provide this comedic relief, and it actually does work in this movie. It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb like it did in the previous film, because they're trying to make every character really quippy and funny, but that's, even though if that's not really true to who they are, I think it just works a lot better here. So again, just really great screenplay all around, really well written, just really enjoyed a lot of things about it. But let's talk about the cinematography in this film, because that's something that was a major complaint in the original movie. Everything looked like shit. Everything looked just so fake and just unpleasant looking. There aren't many shots in that movie that don't look horrible. And it's amazing two things. One, what practical a lot of practical effects are able to accomplish. Two, the 4:3 aspect ratio is an amazing choice, and I understand that this is the aspect ratio he would have used had this film go to theaters, but I think it was a really brilliant choice to use that as the one he does for HBO Max, because it really just brings out everything so much better. It works so well for this movie. You know, you might find yourself getting distracted by it at first, but I really got used to it after a while, and it just made for a much more pleasant viewing experience. I thought the picture itself was just a lot more crisper. It just worked better. I don't know how to really explain it, but it just really does work for this film, and I think it adds a sense of and it just really I don't know, it just really works for this film, and it's hard to really explain it, but I really like what he ended up doing, and the visuals themselves just look so much better here. Steppenwolf especially, the look and feel of him is so much more tangible within this universe. It doesn't look goofy. It doesn't look like they tried to model Ciaran Hinds. They tried to completely model what Ciaran Hinds would look like. I don't know what they were thinking with that other look. This is how Steppenwolf should have looked all along, and it really does work here. And the film in general has some really dynamic action sequences when the characters are using their powers. They are really well done. Every single sequence in this movie involving action really does stick out here, and I think it's, again, because of the fact that we're able to really see it play out, but also it feels a lot more practical in that sense. And I don't know if it's the 4:3 aspect ratio or the different color palettes, but everything just looks so much better here, and I think they just did a really great job with that. The final battle, especially in this film, is so satisfying. It is so utterly satisfying in the best ways. There's so many moments that I think are going to stick with you. There are so many moments that you're going to be thinking about days after you've ended the movie. Hell, I watched this film like a month ago, and I'm still very much thinking about certain scenes that happened within that final battle. It is that epic what they end up doing, especially one moment with the Flash that you truly are never going to forget. They really do not hold back in terms of the action sequences of this film. They really do go all out with them, and again, it's just far more impressive what they're able to accomplish here. I really enjoyed the action sequences a lot in this film. I think it adds a lot to the movie overall. There are about 2 to 3 action scenes in this movie that you did see in the original cut, but here, you get to see them play out a lot more, and they're just a lot more interesting as a result. They stick out a lot more, like Wonder Woman fighting off these bank robbers. This whole sequence that we get in the theatrical cut, here, it's just way better, because you really do get to see what goes down there. And it's not just because of the fact that it's in a 4:3 aspect ratio. It's also the fact this movie is rated R, so there's a lot more that they're able to show, and it really does heighten the film overall. It heightens the tension. It heightens really everything, and I really liked what they were able to do there. So yeah, the cinematography is just so consistent throughout this entire film. Even Cyborg himself, you know, you worry that because he's mostly CGI, he's gonna look a little goofy, but no, he looks very real. If Cyborg was in our universe, I think this is what he would look like, and I think they did a really good job with that overall. There wasn't anything that looked fake to me. There wasn't anything that looked artificial. I thought overall the cinematography was very well done here. The score as well, though, by Tom Holkenborg is a true work of art, and Danny Elfman's score in the original wasn't bad. It just, I don't think it fits that film. I think this fits the film a lot better. It gives it a much more epic feel. It feels a lot more powerful in that way. It's probably the most euphoric score for a comic book movie that I have heard since Endgame. And look, this film is not on the level of that, obviously, because these characters are not in the places that those characters were. But I think what this film does do really well in terms of Tom Holkenborg's score is it just adds to the emotion. It adds to the to the spectacle of it all. It makes it feel a lot more electrifying, and I just really loved what he was able to do here. He really went all out in terms of the score, and it's maybe my favorite score from him yet. It's either this or Mad Max Fury Road, but I really love what Holkenborg was able to accomplish. It's definitely one of my favorite scores of the year for sure. And the editing, that's the other thing I really do want to talk about. Again, a lot of people are going to look at that runtime. Movie's 4 hours long. That's definitely something that I think is going to get to a lot of people. But honestly, those 4 hours fly by so quickly. And I think it's a combination of things. One, the story is extremely interesting throughout the entire time, and there's always something interesting going on. But two, it's the fact that this entire movie is told in like a series of chapters. There's like 6 different chapters that there's like 6 different chapters throughout this entire movie, and it really does work that way. It makes the film feel, I think, a lot more digestible to a lot of people. You know, people are going to be thrown off by that 4-hour runtime, but the film is designed to where if you need to pause it for a little bit, you can do that. If you need to take a few minutes to like grab some food or something, you can do that. And I think that was a really smart choice to go about it that way, because yeah, the film has a gargantuan runtime and that's going to turn a lot of people off, but by structuring it in the way they do, it just makes it a far better experience overall, and one that I think is a lot more rewatchable than you would expect it to be. I've definitely had a lot of desires throughout these past few years, throughout these past few weeks to go back and watch this movie. I think they did a really good job with that overall, and I think just in general, the film is very well paced in that way. So again, there's a lot that I really do love about this movie. I think there's so much that it's able to accomplish. I think there's so many aspects of it that are so much better than the original film for sure. In terms of things that it doesn't do right, because this isn't a truly perfect film, there really is only one thing that brings it down. There is an epilogue that happens, and it is mostly very well paced, although there is an epilogue that happens in the last 30 to 40 minutes of this film, and for a while, it's not that bad. You know, it feels like the last few things we need to just wrap the movie up, but then this whole other segment starts, and I understand the purpose of it, but it felt more like this should be the beginning of the next movie. It felt too much like setup for the next Justice League, which I'm doubtful we're even going to get because we haven't heard any stories. You know, I know people are like tweeting restore the Snyderverse and things like that, and maybe that can happen, but I feel like there's a lot more that needs to happen in order for that to be a thing. I feel like there's a large variety of factors that needs to be contributed and needs to be worked out, settled in order to make that happen. So again, I understand why he decided to do it, but I just wonder what the purpose of it really is, because it is something that I don't know if we're ever going to get to see, and I hope we do get to see it because I like what they ended up doing, but I'm just not sure if we're really going to. So I don't really know if this specific epilogue was really necessary to the story. I don't know if we really needed to keep that in there. I think it's the one thing they could have maybe just cut out of this movie entirely in the hopes that maybe one day Snyder is able to show it. Maybe one day he's able to do it again. And I think they could have done a much better job of that. It's also the only thing in terms of reshoots that very much feels like a reshoot. And unfortunately, that does bring the movie down just a couple pegs for sure. There's some other things I could complain about. There are some choices that Snyder makes regarding Aquaman, and it doesn't really align with the version of Aquaman that we saw in his own movie. But again, this is Snyder's version. He clearly has his own ideas of what he wants to do. I appreciate the fact that this is his movie through and through, and I'm not going to try to get on him too much for going in different directions with things, because I would much rather have a more exciting and different direction than recycled cookie cutter bullshit like we got in the theatrical cut. Ultimately, Zack Snyder's Justice League is pretty much everything I want it to be. It gives so much more purpose to pretty much everything going on with the story. It feels a lot grander. There's a lot more time given to the characters that you really didn't get to see in the original cut. The story itself is far more interesting. You got a much better villain in Steppenwolf. Cyborg especially is immensely improved upon. He becomes maybe my favorite character in the entire movie as a result. It's got some really great action sequences. It's got a really great story to it. And most of all, it feels like Snyder's vision. This is absolutely the movie that he wanted to make. And it's not only a great example of what can happen when a director is working to his fullest potential and what a director is able to do when he has complete creative freedom, it also makes me wonder what else can follow up from this. Are there other films that can maybe come out that needed to be polished on a little bit, needed less involvement from the studio and more involvement from the director? Are there other movies that are able to do something like this? I really do think this could be a gateway into other projects. I do think this could be a gateway into seeing a new way to make mediocre or bad films better and redo them in a way that works for the story. And I think Justice League is just one example of many of what we can do to make it a lot better. And it's honestly really funny to me because a big reason I've heard they originally brought in Joss Whedon, aside from Deborah Snyder's passing and Snyder having to step down as a result, is because they wanted this to be DC's version of Infinity War. They were so dependent on that happening, but you strip everything that could have potentially made it that way and instead give us a very cookie-cutter film, when in reality, Snyder's version is the one that very much does feel like their version of Infinity War. This feels like everything the DCU has been leading up to. This feels like the film that we have been clamoring for the DCU to give us, and now they finally do. And it just makes me wish that we could get a continuation to this someday, but I'm just doubtful that we're going to be able to after all the bullshit that has happened, after everything we've heard with like Ray Fisher and things like that. I just don't know if the practicalities, I don't know if that can actually happen here, and it's unfortunate because of what he was able to accomplish within this film. And it sucks that Warner Brothers had to do what they did, but they hopefully now recognize, just what they could have had, and that they could have actually made that film if they would have just let Snyder do his thing. Overall, this film is pretty much everything I could have hoped for. It is easily the best film in the DCU so far. It's also one of the best films that I have seen so far this year, and I'm absolutely going to give Zack Snyder's Justice League overall an A. I truly can't believe how much I enjoyed this movie. I really did not know if I was going to like this again based upon the way I felt with Zack Snyder's other DCU films, but he really threw it all out on the line here, and it very much paid off for sure. But other than that, guys, my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And the winners, guys, saw this movie, all left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.